7 in the morning. The sun is barely over the horizon.
The sun wasn't even fully awake when it happened, but the moment didn't wait for permission. At an hour when silence usually owns the world, when golf courses are meant to breathe quietly and prepare for routine, Caitlin Clark stepped into a scene that felt more like a final than a friendly, more like judgment than exhibition, more like history preparing to defend itself. This wasn't curiosity in the air, it was tension. Thousands weren't there by accident, and they weren't there for golf. They were there to see if gravity still worked, to see if the weight of expectation could finally bend her, to see if the myth collapsed the second it was removed from hardwood and dropped onto grass. Caitlin Clark didn't walk onto that first tee carrying a basketball legacy. She carried every doubt ever thrown at her, every headline that tried to explain her away, every voice that insisted her rise was temporary, contextual, inflated. This wasn't about a swing, it was about validation or exposure. About whether the thing people fear most about her is true, that she isn't great because of basketball, but because she is great, period. The crowd knew it. The cameras knew it. The critics knew it, even if they refused to say it out loud. This was supposed to be the safe place to watch her stumble. A pro-am. A hobby sport. A moment where excuses are ready-made. And that's exactly why it mattered. Because when Caitlin Clark addresses a challenge, she doesn't negotiate with it. She doesn't lower the stakes. She doesn't ask for grace. She meets it at full volume. Standing over that first shot, she wasn't thinking about applause, she was thinking about execution, about alignment, about tempo, about doing the thing cleanly. Enough that there would be nowhere to hide afterward. Golf doesn't care about reputation. It doesn't care about hype. It humiliates people who assume athleticism alone is enough. And that's what made the strike so devastating. The sound was wrong for doubt. Sharp. Confident. Final. The ball didn't drift or beg for forgiveness, it launched like it had been told where to go and trusted the instruction completely. Before the flight finished, the verdict was already in. The gasp came first, then the roar, not because the shot was miraculous, but because it was controlled. Because it looked practiced. Because it looked like the product of someone who treats preparation as an obligation, not an option. In that single motion, 1,000 think pieces died. This wasn't a basketball star playing dress-up. This was an elite competitor translating discipline across domains in real time. And the crowd felt it immediately. You could see it in how people leaned forward, how phones stopped shaking, how even seasoned professionals glanced twice, recalibrating their assumptions on the fly. This wasn't novelty, it was displacement. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it disrupts hierarchy. Caitlin Clark didn't announce herself on that tee, she asserted herself. And that distinction matters. Because the people who want to see her fail don't fear her talent, they fear what her success says about their limits. They fear what happens when someone proves that excellence isn't confined to one lane, one identity, one permission structure. From the moment she entered public consciousness, the reaction has been split, awe on one side, resistance on the other. Records weren't enough. Ratings weren't enough. Sold-out arenas weren't enough. There always had to be a reason she wasn't really that special. Too much coverage. Too much hype. Too much protection. Too much narrative. But standing on that tee, there was no narrative shield. No teammate to absorb pressure. No rhythm to hide inside. Just silence, expectation, and the hardest sport in the world when it comes to punishing pretenders. And she didn't survive it, she commanded it. Shot after shot, the illusion that this was coincidence evaporated. The posture was calm. The tempo repeatable. The decision-making disciplined. This wasn't instinct bailing her out, this was structure. Study. Transferable skill. The kind that only shows up when someone understands competition at its core. And that's when the moment crossed a line. Because once you see that, you can't unsee it. Once you realize her edge isn't situational but systemic, the entire conversation shifts. It stops being about whether she belongs here and starts being about how many places she could dominate if she chose to. That's what shook people. That's what silenced the lazy criticism. Because you can debate stats. You can contextualize wins. You can argue systems. But you cannot explain away poise under unfamiliar pressure. You cannot fake control in an environment designed to expose you. And Caitlin Clark didn't just pass the test, she rewrote what the test was supposed to measure. By the time she walked off that opening stretch, it was already over. Not the round, the argument. The idea that her greatness was fragile. The idea that she needed protection. The idea that once removed from her comfort zone, she would shrink. Instead, she expanded. And that's the most dangerous kind of athlete there is. Not the one who dominates where they're expected to, but the one who redefines the boundaries of expectation itself. This wasn't a golf moment. It was a warning. A reminder that when Caitlin Clark steps into a space, the space adjusts, not her. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating what had already been decided, one truth settled in heavier than the applause. They didn't panic because she played well, they panicked because she made their explanations useless. That's the part no one wants to say out loud. Caitlin Clark walking onto a golf course and performing under pressure didn't just surprise people, it collapsed an entire ecosystem of excuses that had been carefully built around her rise. For months, even years, the resistance followed a familiar script: minimize, contextualize, redirect. Say she's popular for reasons outside the game. Say her numbers come with conditions. Say the spotlight manufactures her dominance. Say anyone else could do it with the same attention. That script survives only as long as the performance stays contained. Basketball court. Same ball. Same rules. Same environment. But the moment she stepped into a space that offered none of that protection, no home crowd, no system designed around her, no muscle memory built since childhood, the script caught fire. Golf is merciless to frauds. It doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't reward confidence without competence. It punishes impatience, exposes nerves, magnifies doubt. And that's exactly why her critics wanted this moment. Quietly. Secretly. Because if she failed, it would finally give them something tangible. A crack. A clip. A stumble they could loop and point to and say, see? This is who she really is. But instead, she gave them something far worse: proof. Proof that the thing they've been fighting isn't hype, it's infrastructure. That her excellence isn't tied to a sport but rooted in traits that travel: spatial intelligence, emotional control, obsessive preparation, competitive clarity under stress. You can argue talent. You cannot argue composure when everything is unfamiliar. Watching her read greens, adjust strategy, absorb advice, and execute without ego wasn't just impressive, it was threatening. Because it reframed the conversation. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about whether she's overrated in basketball. It was about whether her rivals are limited by comparison. And that's a terrifying shift. Rivalries rely on proximity. On the idea that everyone is operating within the same ceiling. Caitlin Clark shattered that illusion. While others were still fighting for validation inside one lane, she demonstrated the ability to step outside entirely and still dominate the moment. That's not rivalry, that's separation. And separation breeds resentment far faster than competition ever does. The people most unsettled by her golf performance weren't casual fans or analysts chasing clicks. They were the ones who had invested emotionally in her failure. The ones who needed her success to have an asterisk. Because when someone rises this fast, this visibly, this undeniably, it forces uncomfortable self-reflection. If she can do this here too, what does that say about the rest? About effort. About adaptability. About ceilings people quietly accepted for themselves. That's why the reaction was so loud online, even when the criticism lacked substance. Deflection always gets louder when it's losing. Suddenly, it wasn't she's overrated, it was why are we talking about this? Suddenly, it wasn't anyone could do that, it was this doesn't matter. But it mattered. It mattered because millions watched it matter. Because professional golfers acknowledged it mattered. Because the energy around her didn't diminish when she changed sports, it intensified.